Hey there. Let me take you on a trip you never asked for, right to the banks of the Nile, deep into the world of ancient Egypt. And before you start picturing gold masks and palm-fringed temples, pause. Tonight, you're going to find out what it actually feels like to survive a morning in a land where the sun doesn't rise. It launches an attack. If you stick around, I'll reveal the one thing about ancient Egyptian mornings that nobody tells you. And trust me, it's not the pyramids. While you're here, if you end up enjoying this kind of journey, go ahead and hit like or subscribe, but only if you want more of these uncomfortable adventures. I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Drop it in the comments and let's see how far our little time machine can reach. So, dim the lights, settle in, and get ready. This isn't a travel brochure. It's ancient Egypt, and you're about to meet the morning head-on. Picture this. Before you even open your eyes, you're already sweating. The sun is absolutely tearing through your reed-thatched roof, determined to audition for the role of most unforgiving sky god. There are no blackout curtains, no window screens, no luxury of air conditioning, just you, a stubborn straw mat, and a linen sheet that's more of a suggestion than an actual blanket. You're not waking up gently, you're being slow roasted alive, and it's not even breakfast time yet. The Nile breeze, that so-called gift of the gods, is suspiciously absent. If it ever existed, it probably gave up around 2800 BC, and nobody bothered to tell the travel writers. You finally convince your body to move, and as you step outside, the air attacks you. It's barely morning and already flirting with 90 degrees Fahrenheit, roughly 32 Celsius for everyone outside the US, with no sign of letting up. The sun doesn't just hang in the sky, it charges at your linen tunic and saps all hope of comfort. If you were hoping for some kind of protective skincare, forget it. No SPF 50, no aloe vera. Not even a floppy hat with a cheeky resort logo. Ancient Egyptian sun protection is basically a choice between mud, crocodile dung, or pure wishful thinking. The elite might get perfumed oils, but unless you've bribed your way into a temple or have royal blood, your best option is to become a walking, sweating experiment in natural disaster. Preparedness. By the time midday rolls around, the stones you're standing on are so hot they could double as kitchen appliances. Shade is a myth, unless you count the narrow sliver behind a mud brick wall, which is sweating just as hard as you are. Trees are a luxury most people never see, and if you find one, it's probably already claimed by someone who outranks you. You're starting to look and feel like a piece of overcooked pottery, but don't even think about whining. If Ra, the sun god, is on duty, then your suffering is practically a compliment to his divine power. In Egypt, the weather isn't just weather, it's a spiritual power move. Surviving a single morning here demands more than hydration and humility. It takes a Herculean tolerance for discomfort and the ability to endure being slowly baked from the inside out. The sun is relentless, the air is thick, and you're already fantasizing about climbing into a cold storage room, if only such a thing existed. And this, my friend, is just the warm-up. You haven't even started your so-called morning routine yet. Once you're upright and more or less resigned to your fate, it's off to the Nile. Good news, the river is close. Bad news, you can smell it before you see it. The mighty Nile, legendary lifeline of Egypt, worshipped and romanticized by poets and priests alike, is really just a pungent, chaotic ribbon of life and death. If you were expecting a sparkling blue oasis, prepare for disappointment. What you get is a mashup of fish, swamp, livestock, and things that really shouldn't have legs but do. And yes, this is your bathroom for the morning. Forget about soap, because it hasn't been invented yet, or if it has, it's locked away somewhere you'll never see. Your cleaning regimen is as advanced as it gets. Sand. Lots of it. Exfoliation, ancient Egypt style. means grabbing handfuls of coarse grains and scrubbing, like you're trying to erase your own skin. It's not soothing. It's not spa-like. It's just you, fighting friction and silently praying that you don't pick up anything with more legs than you started with. If you're lucky enough to live in Memphis or Thebes, you might find a public basin or a communal cistern, possibly the ancient world's version of an overcrowded swimming pool. But for everyone else, it's Nile or nothing. Privacy is non-existent. You're sharing this sacred river with families, neighbors, livestock, and the occasional sacred ibis who struts around like he owns the place. Laundry is pounded against rocks as you keep one eye on your tunic and the other on the water, just in case a crocodile decides to add you to its breakfast menu. Now, while you're scrubbing and splashing, don't forget that everyone upstream is also making use of the river. People, cattle, and the occasional floating funeral procession all share the same water. If you think about it too long, you might just lose your appetite before breakfast. But in ancient Egypt, this is the definition of clean. You emerge from the Nile feeling only slightly less sticky and a bit more anxious about leeches. The ritual of collecting water is another daily ordeal. Jars are filled, balanced precariously on heads, and carried back to the house before the sun turns the clay into something that resembles overbaked bread. If you're lucky, you make it home with more water than you lost to sloshing or evaporation. This isn't just a chore, it's a spiritual gauntlet, a necessary, slightly traumatic part of the morning that everyone endures because nobody has invented plumbing yet. Now, with your body sandpapered and your hair smelling faintly of swamp, it's time for the most important meal of the day. Don't get your hopes up for eggs Benedict or fruit parfait. Breakfast in ancient Egypt is less about flavor and more about survival. You might have a low stool to sit on, but squatting in a corner is the standard. The main course, bread. Not just any bread, but a dense chewy brick made from emmer wheat or barley. It's baked in clay ovens that double as real estate for the local rat population. Every bite is a gamble between sustenance and a free helping of sand, courtesy of the ancient grinding stones. Sand isn't a topping, by the way. It's just part of the experience. Every chew crunches like a mouthful of gravel, and you try not to think about how many minerals you're accidentally supplementing. Then comes the beer. Don't imagine a cold, refreshing pint. Ancient Egyptian beer is basically liquid bread, thick, cloudy, and warm. It's about as close to a smoothie as the ancient world gets, but with the lingering taste of sour cereal and questionable fermentation. You drink it because it's safer than the river water, and because even children are expected to start their day with a mug of this grainy, calorie-packed sludge. If you're exceptionally fortunate, your breakfast comes with an onion or a handful of dried dates. Protein is a distant fantasy, reserved for days when someone manages to catch a fish and is generous enough to share. Otherwise, you're left with bread and beer, fuel for the next round of sand, sun, and relentless labor. Flies swarm as soon as you sit down, treating your meal like it's their own personal buffet. You swat at them with one hand and clutch your cup with the other, resigned to the fact that this is probably the best meal you'll get today. Breakfast isn't about enjoyment, it's about function. You eat to survive, not to savor. You chew through your sand-laced bread, gulp your sour beer, and try not to dwell on the likelihood that tomorrow's breakfast will be exactly the same. Still, you'll fuel just enough to make it to noon if the sun and the flies don't finish you off first. That's your reality, surviving the morning in ancient Egypt with nothing but grit, sweat, and a healthy dose of sarcasm to get you through. And now, before you start thinking about a nap or sneaking off for a second breakfast, remember, you're not done. The day is just getting started. In ancient Egypt, the real test comes after breakfast, when labor, authority, and the will of the divine pharaoh take center stage. Bon appetit. You've had your gritty bread, your chunky beer, and just enough rest to call yourself functional. All right, time to shake off the sleep from your eyes and stagger into the waking nightmare that is ancient Egyptian labor. You thought your last performance review was rough. Here, burnout is not a metaphor, it's a daily forecast. Unless you somehow sweet-talked your way into being a scribe, a priest, or one of the precious few born with a golden spoon and a direct line to Ra, you're just another body for the grindstone. Forget standing desks and free coffee. Your workspace is the open desert. Your break room is a patch of shade that smells like camel. And your colleagues are mostly silent unless they're yelling at you. Picture yourself as a farmer. It's not even dawn, but you're already knee-deep in the Nile's sticky black mud, pulling up weeds and planting barley by hand. Your tools were designed by someone who apparently hated backs. Wooden plow, dull sickle, and your own aching fingers. These are your instruments of pain. Every time your spine protests, consider it a performance bonus. That's proof you're doing it right. Now imagine the local overseer, a man whose only joy in life is bellowing at you from the riverbank. He watches for any hint of slacking, and his shadow stretches longer than the sunrise. But let's say you're not even that lucky. Maybe you're a laborer drafted for one of Pharaoh's many eternal monuments. The job description: dragging stones the size of your neighbor's house up, ramps made of gravel and hope, barefoot, under a sun that seems determined to bleach you into oblivion. There's no ocean breeze or palm tree in sight, just dust, heat, and the low hum of collective suffering. Trip once, and that's a broken ankle. The response from your supervisor: a bored shrug, maybe a muttered prayer, and then he's back to barking at the next in line. Ever wonder what it's like to work on a tomb? Imagine hammering limestone for hours, chiseling out burial chambers, for someone who'll get to nap for eternity, while you pray for a day off that never comes. Screwing up the pharaoh's final resting place isn't just a bad look, it's career-ending, sometimes literally. If you're exceptionally unlucky, your severance package involves a sealed crypt and a curse that comes with its own hieroglyphic instructions. And before you assume this is just a boys' club of misery, let's talk about women's work. There's no glass ceiling here, it's more of a mud brick wall. Domestic labor is an Olympic event, grinding grain until your arms go numb, hauling water from the river in clay jars that weigh as much as a toddler, weaving linen in a stifling hut, wrangling children, and still finding time to help in the fields. Your break is the 7 minutes your baby finally falls asleep. Dinner prep happens on the go, sweating into your tunic, snacking on whatever you can scrounge from the pantry as you race the setting sun. Catch your breath and you're already behind. Fall behind, and someone else claims your grain quota, leaving you to face the music. And by music, I mean blame. There's no such thing as clocking out. The sun itself is your time card, and it's always watching. When it finally drops behind the horizon, you stumble home, skin caked in dust, feet throbbing, daydreaming of softer sandals and a less vindictive solar deity. Work here isn't a 9 to 5. It's a full-body contract with the gods, one you renew every morning until either your body or your overseer decides you're obsolete. And as grim as that sounds, you haven't hit rock bottom yet. So, let's say after sweating your soul out, you have the urge to mutter a complaint, maybe a little. This job stinks, or why am I doing this again? Don't even think about it. In ancient Egypt, complaining about your work isn't just risky. It could be a one-way ticket to an early grave. Here, your boss isn't just a bureaucrat or a bloodless CEO. He's the living embodiment of divine authority. The pharaoh isn't just a king. He's the human form of Horus, the son of Ra, and the cosmic glue keeping the universe from unraveling. If the river floods and crops thrive, thank the pharaoh. If there's famine or drought, maybe you didn't honor him enough. questioning his decisions is more than rude, it's sacrilege. Speaking ill of the pharaoh could earn you a date with a whip, a set of shackles, or a fast track to the afterlife, minus all the fun burial goods. His face stares at you from every temple wall, every statue, every coin, even the bread you eat. His name is chanted in rituals, painted larger than anyone else's in every mural. That's not ego, that's the law. And if you dream of seeing him in person, keep dreaming. The closest you'll ever get is watching his golden bark float by during a festival. Blink, and he's vanished. Back to a palace dripping with gold and surrounded by layers of officials, scribes, and guards. If you're one of the chosen few assigned to a royal project, a tomb, a temple, a colossus, you're expected to serve with divine joy. Or at least, that's what you'll say. Because pretending to be honored to chisel stone for 14 hours straight is a lot safer than the alternative. Harbor thoughts of rebellion. Forget it. Pharaohs have a zero-tolerance policy for dissent. Ask the last village that tried to withhold taxes. Oh wait, you can't, because it's not on the map anymore. Welcome to the divine pecking order. The pharaoh is a god. And you? You're just lucky to be allowed to sweat in his name. Now, back to work, because in Egypt, rest is for the dead. And if you thought surviving the sun and the overseer was hard, just wait. In this world, sand isn't just under your feet. It's your constant companion, your seasoning, your roommate, and sometimes your most determined foe. Let's find out how daily life, religion, medicine, and the fate of women unfolded in this sun-baked kingdom. You might think you've got sand problems, maybe a little grit in your shoes after a trip to the beach, or some stuck to the bottom of your sunscreen bottle. But ancient Egypt scoffs at your suffering. Here, sand isn't a minor inconvenience. It's your relentless, omnipresent co-worker and uninvited dinner guest. Sand is in your tunic, in your mouth, and, let's be honest, probably in places you didn't even know existed. You could be trying to nap, barter for onions in the market, or just minding your own business. And suddenly, a gust of wind turns your face into a living sandpaper experiment. Let's talk fashion, because you're not exactly strutting down the Nile in Versace. Your daily uniform is linen, light, airy, and about as effective at blocking sand as a fishing net is at stopping a school of eels. The sand slips down your tunic, clings to your sweat, and settles into every crease, visible or otherwise. And when it comes to eating, forget about farm to table. It's all about millstone to molar. Every loaf of bread hides a crunchy secret. The flour, ground between slabs of stone, comes with a bonus sprinkle of rock grit. Ancient Egyptians didn't just eat their calories, they ate their kitchen tools. It's why if you dig up their skulls today, you'll see teeth worn down to flat river pebbles. Imagine munching breakfast while simultaneously giving yourself a free dental filing. Your house isn't a sanctuary either. Those charming mud brick walls are full of cracks and gaps. The windows are just holes in the wall, and a breeze means an instant indoor sandstorm. Floors, dusted with a fine layer of the Nile's finest. Cooking pots, seasoned with the crunch of the desert. Your bed is less a restful escape and more a sandbox in disguise, daring you to find a clean spot. Shoes, optional, but not because it's comfortable. Most Egyptians go barefoot, which means your soles morph into something between battered old leather and a dry riverbed. If you do own sandals, they're woven from reeds, stylish, but about as protective as a paper napkin in a hurricane. Now and then, the gods let you know who's boss with a sandstorm, a meteorological slap in the face. One minute you're chatting with a neighbor, the next you're choking on sand, squinting through the haze, and wondering if anyone can see the terror in your eyes. Visibility drops to zero, and suddenly everyone around you becomes a coughing shadow. In Egypt, sand is more than just scenery. It's a participant in every aspect of your life. It's in your lungs, your pores, and your soup. And no, you can't just scrub it off. You tried that in the Nile already, which is itself half mud, half river, and probably a third sand. But daily life isn't just about battling the world's most aggressive exfoliant. Religion here isn't a weekend hobby. It's the operating system for your reality. Everything from your job description to your bedtime routine is dictated by the whims of gods who seem to have opinions about everything you do. Your town is a patchwork of temples, each devoted to a different deity. There's Ra, chauffeuring the sun across the sky, with the kind of punctuality even modern subway systems can only dream of. Thoth, who rocks the head of an ibis and moonlights as the god of scribes and lunar calendars. Sobek, the crocodile-headed enforcer, who keeps the Nile from turning into a dry ditch. And Bastet, the cat goddess, who, let's face it, has the entire PR department wrapped around her little paw. Personal freedom? Not so much. Your day begins and ends with rituals for the gods. You wake up, thank Ra for not forgetting to bring the sun. Maybe spill a little beer for Hathor, just in case she's watching. Stub your toe. Better mutter a quiet apology. Nobody wants to attract the attention of a minor grudge holding spirit. Before you eat, you offer a bite to the gods. Before you sleep, you whisper a prayer to keep Set, Lord of Chaos, from flipping your life upside down while you dream. Even funerals are less about closure and more about passing a multi-stage cosmic exam, dodging demon invigilators, and proving you're not a moral deadbeat. And the afterlife. It's not a free pass. You don't just clock out and wander into eternity. You face the ultimate performance review. Your heart is weighed against the feather of Ma'at, the embodiment of truth and order. If your heart is heavy with guilt, betrayal, or maybe just a bit too much goat pilfering, you're fed to Amit, a composite beast with a crocodile's jaw, a lion's torso, and the legs of your worst anxiety dream. So even the dead are on probation, and the paperwork is cosmic. Here's the kicker though. For all its bureaucracy, ancient Egyptian religion isn't crushingly grim. It's actually comforting. Life is a balancing act, and if you stick to the rituals and keep Ma'at happy, you have a shot at eternal peace, endless family reunions, and probably a boat or two. The wealthy, of course, get more elaborate afterlife packages, towering temples, priestly attention, and a better shot at cosmic VIP status. Peasants, meanwhile, just hope the gods are in a generous mood when it's their turn to shuffle off this sandy coil. In Egypt, faith isn't a choice. It's your job, your insurance, and your travel agency for the next world. Now, let's say you've stepped on something sharp, been bitten by a questionable insect, or picked up a mysterious rash, which, let's be honest, is basically every Tuesday. Time for some ancient Egyptian medical care. Don't expect a waiting room or a white coat. You're about to be treated with a dazzling blend of herbal wisdom, ritual magic, and blind optimism. Your healer is both physician and priest, armed with surgical tools, centuries-old medical texts, and a healthy respect for both anatomy and angry spirits. You might be handed a thick paste made from honey, moldy bread, and crushed herbs. Honey's a natural antibiotic, and the mold contains the ancient world's prototype for penicillin. It works, sort of. But before it's applied, the healer will recite a spell, just to make sure you're not suffering from a case of vengeful ancestor syndrome. Headache? You get onions mashed into your scalp, while someone nearby hums a hymn to Thoth. Cough? The prescription is cow dung mixed with dates, generously smeared on your chest, and a prayer thrown in for good measure. Eye infection? Time for a lizard blood, and beer facial, topped with a plea to Horus. Surgery is possible, but don't expect anesthesia. Abscesses get lanced, bones are set, wounds are stitched with linen thread. There's no gentle sedation, just a sharp knife and a sturdy friend to pin you down while you holler into a mud brick cushion. Dentistry is a nightmare all its own. Remember all that sand in your bread? By your 20s, your teeth are as flat as stone tiles. If a tooth gets infected, you can either live with it, die from it, or let someone yank it out with a tool that looks suspiciously like it was borrowed from a blacksmith's reject pile. And let's not forget the amulets. Whether you're giving birth, getting your wounds sewn up, or simply sneezing too enthusiastically, a proper healer will hang a charm around your neck. Because you never know when your stomach cramps are actually the handiwork of a ghostly serpent squeezing your spleen. Egyptian medicine has its moments of brilliance, but mostly you're left hoping the gods are better at healing than your local apothecary. Now, here comes a twist that would surprise most time travelers. Ancient Egyptian women actually had rights. Real, legal, enforceable rights. They could own property, run businesses, file for divorce, and even take a man to court. On papyrus, it sounds downright progressive. But don't start booking your girl boss time travel vacation just yet. Reality still bites, and it bites with sand-encrusted teeth. If you're a woman in ancient Egypt, your day starts before dawn. You're grinding grain on a stone slab that's slowly pulverizing both your wheat and your vertebrae. Then you haul buckets of water from the Nile, cook breakfast, chase your children, manage the household, feed the livestock, and, if the family farm needs it, work the fields until your skin matches the bronze of the statues in the temple. There's no such thing as me time, no spa days, and maternity leave is a fantasy best left to the gods. Childbirth is a heroic ordeal. You're lucky to have a midwife, but there's no disinfectant, no pain relief, and the soundtrack is incense smoke and whispered prayers, not soothing harp playlists. You give birth in a sweltering room, hoping for minimal blood and maximum luck. Fashion, for women, is linen dresses, lightweight, breezy, and utterly transparent. There's no underwear, no shoes, and the sun seems determined to turn your skin into leather. Sand grinds into every seam, and the local insects treat you as an all-you-can-eat buffet. Makeup is available, think kohl for the eyes, but it's lead-based, and the application stick looks a bit too much like a giant toothpick for comfort. If you're born into wealth, things get a little easier. You might learn to read and write, manage business ledgers, or serve as a priestess. If you're born royal, you could even become pharaoh, like Hatshepsut or Cleopatra, ruling with both power and some absolutely iconic eyeliner. But if you're poor, your legal status is impressive, but your daily life is still a physically grueling slog. You work, sweat, haul, bend, give birth, mourn, and keep going. You're not chained by law, but by the need to survive. Still, Egyptian women had agency that was rare for the ancient world. They could speak in court, inherit property, and keep their own wealth after marriage. They didn't become a husband's possession when the wedding was over. Compared to most other ancient societies, that's revolutionary. So yes, Egyptian women had real rights, but comfort. That was reserved for stone goddesses and gold statues, not the woman elbow-deep in dough, while swatting flies away from a sticky toddler. So, you've survived another day in ancient Egypt. Sand in your teeth, prayers on your lips, and maybe a new scar or two. But life here isn't just a struggle for survival. It's a balancing act of faith, resilience, and ambition, with the ordinary and the extraordinary tangled together in every sunrise. And as the sky fades from jade to indigo, you can't help but wonder what waits for you when the day ends, when your heart is weighed and your story is retold in the silent halls of the afterlife. Stick around. Because in Egypt, death isn't the end. It's just the next item on your to-do list. Congratulations! You survived another suffocatingly hot, bug-infested day in ancient Egypt. You chewed your jaw-strengthening bread, lugged your buckets of Nile water, avoided any visible signs of divine displeasure, and, with a little luck, navigate it around a sandstorm or two. Just when you think it's time to flop down on your mat and enjoy a moment of peace, I'm here to remind you there's no such thing as relaxing in ancient Egypt. Because here, your biggest challenge doesn't actually start until you're dead. Death in Egypt isn't the end. It's more like the world's most elaborate and high stakes. Exit interview, complete with bureaucracy that would make the DMV seem efficient. Your soul embarks on a journey that's less eternal rest and more spiritual obstacle course with paperwork. First stop, the Hall of Ma'at. Imagine a grand cosmic courtroom where you, yes, you, stand in front of a panel of 42 gods and goddesses, each one looking ready to grill you on your moral resume. Here, you recite an ancient list of denials. I did not steal. I did not lie. I definitely never so much as glanced at my neighbor's donkey with envy. This is the original no wrongdoing statement, and you'd better hope the gods don't call your bluff. Because these deities have been around since before breakfast was invented, and they've heard every excuse in the scroll. Then comes the main event, the weighing of your heart. In Egyptian belief, your heart isn't just a blood-pumping organ. It's the hard drive of your soul, storing every feeling, thought, and embarrassing secret you've ever had. The gods place your heart on one side of a giant scale, and on the other side goes the feather of Ma'at, the feather representing truth, balance, and cosmic order. If your heart outweighs the feather, congratulations, you've just flunked the most important test of your afterlife. Enter Amit, the nightmare fuel of Egyptian mythology. She's part lion, part crocodile, part hippo, basically. She looks like the result of a committee that couldn't agree on which animal was scariest. Amit doesn't bother with second chances or appeals. If your heart is heavy with sin, she doesn't arrest you or send you to some shadowy purgatory. She just eats your soul, right then and there. No afterlife, no reincarnation, no ghostly wandering, just absolute, permanent deletion. In a civilization obsessed with eternity, this is the ultimate cosmic insult. And here's the kicker. You don't just have to live right, you have to speak right, too. Screw up your confession, forget the sacred phrases, or bungle a line before the tribunal, and you're toast. It's like being handed the world's hardest open book exam, except failing means you're lunch for a monster with way too many teeth. But let's say you pass. You get to enter the field of reeds, a paradise that looks suspiciously like Egypt, only with better crops, endless boats, and, if the gods are feeling generous, fewer sand fleas. Here you can farm without sweating, eat without ever running out of food, and spend eternity with your family, who are probably just as relieved as you are to have made it. And that's why Egyptians treat tomb preparation like we treat retirement plans, except with more gold and fewer spreadsheets. The Book of the Dead isn't a horror story. It's a spiritual cheat sheet, packed with spells, passwords, and reminders like, don't insult Sobek the crocodile god. Because in the afterlife, the tiniest misstep might land you on the wrong side of Amit's jaws. So yes, paradise awaits, but only if you make every move and mutter every word with cosmic precision. One curse word, one forgotten offering, and your soul is on the menu. If there's one small mercy in all this, it's the linen. Egyptian linen is the MVP of ancient fabrics, light, breathable, and your only shield against the relentless sun. Every living soul in Egypt, from the high priest to the guy who's been hauling bricks since sunrise, is swaddled in this plant-based miracle. Your daily uniform? If you're a man, a white kilt or loincloth. If you're a woman, a sleeveless, straight-cut linen dress may be held up by straps if you're feeling fancy. If you've got wealth or status, you might have pleats, beads, or a dye job that screams middle management. If you don't, it's plain, white, and probably hasn't seen real soap in quite some time. On laundry day, if such a thing exists, You're hunched over the riverbank, scrubbing your garments while side-eyeing the water for hippos that could end your day faster than the sunburn. Footwear. Unless you're a priest or attending a festival, you're barefoot, making your daily commute a minefield of hot sand and the kind of rocks that always find the softest part of your foot. Sandals exist, of course, wicker for the common folk, leather for the elite, but they're reserved for special occasions, like funerals, or dealing with particularly judgmental in-laws. Accessories? Absolutely. But don't expect a fashion revolution. Amulets are everywhere, warding off evil spirits and showing off your spiritual insurance plan. Eye makeup isn't just for drama. It's practical, made from powdered mineral to cut the glare and fend off eye infections. The ancient Egyptians were basically the inventors of SPF eyeliner. But no matter how crisp your linen or how impressive your coal game, the bugs are unimpressed. Flies, gnats, and mosquitoes treat you like an all-you-can-eat buffet. You're constantly swatting, dabbing on perfumed oils, and hoping your linen doesn't turn into a sticky, see-through disaster before noon. And don't even dream about rotating your wardrobe with the seasons. Egypt has hot and slightly less hot, so linen is your year-round destiny. Sure, your outfit beats Roman wool togas by a mile, but don't let the breezy silhouette fool you. Beneath the elegant folds, you're still sweating, swatting, and yearning for a break that simply never comes. So you've survived another day, bricks hauled, sandstorms dodged, linen holding together by sheer willpower and the occasional patch. But in Egypt, survival is just a temporary win, because even the toughest don't get a long run. Let's face it, if you make it to 35, you're a local legend. Childhood diseases, fevers, infected wounds, accidents, and the ever-present animal kingdom are all gunning for you. Live past infancy? Great. You're an adult at 13, married, working, raising kids, and already running out of years. The dangers are endless. You might fall to sunstroke, a scorpion sting, crocodile jaws, or just a bad loaf of bread. Medical care? If you catch a fever, the best you can hope for is a poultice of honey and herbs, and an offering to whichever god is on call that week. But here's the remarkable twist. Egyptians don't fear death. They plan for it meticulously, like it's a second career. If you're lucky enough to have money, you start building your tomb the moment you can afford it. Think of it as booking your long-term Airbnb in eternity. You stockpile grave goods, jewelry, food, perfumes, statues, even little servant figurines called shabtis, designed to handle chores for you in the afterlife. Yes, even in death, you're hoping to delegate. The embalming process is a marathon of ritual and resourcefulness. Your body is dried out with natron salts, wrapped in endless layers of linen, and tucked into a painted sarcophagus that's meant to impress gods and neighbors alike. You're sent off with your own copy of the Book of the Dead, a collection of spells, passwords, and cosmic travel tips, so you don't end up lost in some supernatural alley, or worse, become monster chow. If you're not rich, your tomb is more practical than palatial. A simple pit in the sand, a few scraps of cloth, maybe a pot or two, and a quick covering of earth before the wind sweeps you away. No painted murals, no gold mask, just you, the desert, and the hope that your family remembered the right spells. Still, even the poorest Egyptians cling to the same dream, a serene eternity in the field of reeds, where the sun is gentle, the crops are lush, and you can float down the Nile forever, finally free from flies, heat, and sand in awkward places. So yes, in ancient Egypt, dying young is pretty much expected. But if you live well, honor the gods, and avoid ticking off any jackal-headed deities along the way, you might just secure yourself a prime spot in the next world, linen, shabtis, and all. Just remember, your cosmic interview never really ends. And if you need a little comfort in this afterlife marathon, at least your linen won't suffocate you. probably. You managed to outwit the sand, the sun, the bugs, and, at least for now, the bureaucracy of the afterlife. But don't start celebrating just yet, because the real adventure is only beginning. Up next, we're diving straight into the tomb itself, the realities of death, tomb robbery, hieroglyphs, and daily life among the dead. Let's see what eternity really has in store. Congratulations. You've made it past mummification, through the gauntlet of elaborate spells and incense, and into your very own Egyptian tomb. The priests have done their job. You're swaddled tighter than a department store mannequin. And, at last, you're ready for that eternal, undisturbed nap. Except, surprise, peace in death is about as much of a myth as a talking jackal. Because here's the reality. In Egypt, even resting in peace comes with a catch. Let's set the scene. You're surrounded by all the finest afterlife. Starter kits, gold rings, amulets, perfume jars, hand-carved statues, and, for the big spenders, actual boats, yes, boats, crammed in for the journey to the next world. But all this loot doesn't just attract the gods. It also brings every opportunist with a chisel, a torch, and a loose sense of morality. Tomb robbery wasn't a once-in-a-century scandal. It was practically an industry. The valuables left with you for eternity. Temptation for someone whose eternity plan involves a quick smash and grab and a sprint into the night. Pharaohs tried everything to outsmart the living. They carved their tombs deep into cliffs, built secret chambers, and scrawled curses that read like the world's angriest Yelp reviews. Picture this. May a crocodile eat your soul before breakfast. Or, may your body be twisted forever by a serpent made entirely of fire. Spooky, right? Not spooky enough. The curses just served as a challenge. Robbers came anyway, tiptoeing in darkness, armed with insider tips. Some were crafty locals. Others were the same builders who carved the tombs in the first place, apparently. Job security in ancient Egypt included a 5-finger discount. Even priests and guards weren't above a little nocturnal side hustle. The risk, enormous. If you got caught, you weren't just grounded. We're talking public beatings, chopped off body parts, exile to the desert, or a one-way trip to the afterlife yourself. Still, the payoff usually outweighed the risk. After all, mummies aren't known for putting up a fight. And don't think the poor were safe from post-mortem pilfering. Even the simplest graves, maybe just a jug of beer or a loaf of bread, were fair game. In a world where food is never guaranteed and linen is as valuable as cash, a dead man's last snack is just another opportunity. The irony here. Tomb robbing wasn't always about pure greed. Sometimes it was just about not starving. Egypt saw its share of famines, political meltdowns, and foreign invasions. When your kids are crying from hunger, someone else's funerary bread starts to look less sacred and a lot more like breakfast. So, in the Egyptian afterlife, you're not just dodging spiritual judgment. You're hoping some desperate neighbor with a crowbar doesn't decide to redecorate your eternal resting spot. If you really want to rest in peace, your best bet is obscurity. If no one knows where you're buried, you just might make it through eternity with your gold sandals and reputation intact. But even then, you're not safe from the sands of time or from the next guy with a bad attitude and a pickaxe. Now, let's talk about those famous walls. You know the ones. Epic stone surfaces covered in mysterious symbols, birds, eyes, snakes, flowers, and enough sideways. Walking stick figures to fill a runway show. Egyptian hieroglyphs. They look incredible, sure, but try to read them and you'll realize they're less like ancient emoji and more like a 700-piece jigsaw puzzle made by someone with a twisted sense of humor. These weren't just decorations. They were the ultimate writing system, crammed with over 700 symbols, and the number just kept growing. Some stood for entire words, others for sounds, and then there were the determinatives, sort of like ancient footnotes, just there to make sure you don't get too comfortable. Don't expect spaces or punctuation either. Egyptian scribes didn't have time for clarity. Every scroll, every wall, every sarcophagus inscription, one long, beautiful mind-bender with no vowels, no breaks, and a stubborn insistence on context. Oh, and another twist. The direction of reading isn't fixed. Could be left to right, right to left, even top to bottom. The trick: check which way the birds and people are facing. If they're looking left, read left. If they're looking right, read right. If they're upside down, well, good luck. You probably weren't supposed to be reading that part anyway. But who actually learned to read this cryptic language? Not your average farmer or potter, that's for sure. Literacy was a luxury for the elite. Maybe 1% of Egyptians could actually read and write. If you wanted to join their ranks, you started as a child, grinding through endless hours of memorization, copying scrolls until your wrist curled into a permanent claw. But there was a payoff. Scribes were the quiet power brokers of Egypt. They didn't haul bricks or sweat under the burning sun. They penned tax records, court verdicts, love letters, and spells. In a world where writing could literally preserve your soul, scribes were untouchable. They had job security and respect, and they rarely had to worry about breaking their backs in the fields. For everyone else, hieroglyphs were pure magic, powerful, mysterious, and just a little terrifying. Writing your name in hieroglyphs was more than vanity. It was spiritual insurance. Your name written down meant your soul could survive. Have your name erased, and you faced total annihilation, spiritually, socially, eternally. So let's just say spelling errors weren't taken lightly. You might think, looking at these walls, that ancient Egyptians spent their days basking in beauty and order, surrounded by lotus-scented air and the gentle hum of sacred music. But a quick reality check: for most Egyptians, daily life was much closer to Survivor, Nile edition. Imagine starting your morning on a hard-packed dirt floor, swatting at flies, and hoping you'll get enough food to last the day. Your feet are bare, the sand is already burning hot, and hauling water from the river is your daily cardio. Cooking is done over open flames. Your living quarters are filled with smoke, bugs, and the less charming smells of livestock. Disease is a constant threat, along with curses, crocodiles, and the possibility of a snake curling up in your bed. Forget toothpaste, medicine, or any kind of retirement plan. If you're lucky, you own 2 linen loincloths and a wooden stool. Your boss is a living god who can confiscate your land with the snap of his fingers. The sun is merciless, the Nile unpredictable, and your greatest hope for upward mobility is to avoid dying of heat stroke or plague. There are no antibiotics, no sunscreen, no privacy, and plumbing is just a rumor you've heard from the neighbors. Born a laborer, you'll die one. Born a scribe? Congratulations, you're set for life unless you misspell the wrong pharaoh's name. But here's the twist. Despite all this, despite the hunger, the toil, the sand in every crevice, Egyptians found joy. They danced, sang, played games, and feasted whenever they could. They worshipped, painted, told jokes, and imagined eternity so vividly that they raised monuments that outlast empires. There was beauty in the struggle, purpose in faith, and a sense of cosmic order that made every sunrise, however blistering, worth witnessing. Still, let's not kid ourselves. Drop a modern person into this world, strip away your filtered water, your painkillers, your sneakers, and your smartphone, and watch how fast you tap out. By the second sandstorm, you'd be begging for Wi-Fi and air conditioning. The truth: you probably wouldn't survive a day in ancient Egypt. But here's the kicker. They survived for thousands of years. That's why we're still talking about them, while you're just now realizing your afterlife plan needs serious work. And just as you're adjusting to the sand, the sweat, and the relentless reality of Egypt, get ready to leave the Nile behind. Because next, I'm whisking you halfway across the world, straight to the heart of ancient Teotihuacan. There, a pyramid unlike any other is waiting, refusing to be forgotten. Let's see if the Temple of the Feathered Serpent treats its VIP guests any better. Step onto the Avenue of the Dead, and you can't miss it. One pyramid that refuses to play along with the usual script. Forget the gentle arches and serene carvings you might expect from a spiritual monument. Here, the stones are alive with menace. Dozens of colossal serpent heads jut from the facade, jaws stretched wide, fangs on display, their eyes forever frozen in that moment before the strike. This is the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, Quetzalcoatl, if you want to impress the locals or your next trivia night. And make no mistake, this temple doesn't invite you in, it dares you to approach. Even now, centuries after its builders vanished, the feeling is unmistakable. You're being watched. Every step you take toward those gaping maws is a step deeper into a game of cosmic intimidation. You step out of the sun and into the half-shadow of the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, and it's like the air itself thickens. The stones are older than your city, older than your language, maybe even older than your ambitions. For generations, this temple squatted at the heart of Teotihuacan, silent, massive, and always watching. Locals spun tales about it, letting rumors and night terrors fill the gaps that history left behind. Scholars, centuries later, would peer at its scales and try to reverse engineer its secrets. But nobody, absolutely nobody, was prepared for what the ground itself was hiding underneath all those layers of time, dust, and denial. Fast forward to the late 1980s and early 2000s, when a few stubborn archaeologists decided to get their hands dirty. They pushed past the accepted stories, literally breaking through ancient floors. What they uncovered wasn't some lost treasure hoard or a forgotten king's tomb. It was a horror show of precision and purpose. Beneath the temple, they found sealed chambers and deep pits, each one packed with human bodies. Not the chaotic jumble of battle casualties or a plague pit, but something else entirely. Every body was placed just so, every detail carefully managed, as if the victims themselves were being arranged for a cosmic still life. Imagine this: over 200 young men, most not yet old enough to have learned regret, laid out in patterns that make your skin crawl. Some of them wore jewelry made of human jawbones, a fashion statement that says, "I'm with the gods, but only temporarily." Others had their hands bound behind their backs, their final posture frozen in surrender. A few were missing their heads entirely, the neat handiwork of someone wielding obsidian knives, sharp enough to shave through bone, as if it were fruit. And those knives, black as midnight, were left scattered around like calling cards. These weren't tools of random carnage. They were implements of ritual, cold and deliberate. But the deeper you look, the more that word ritual starts to feel like an understatement. The bodies weren't just dumped. They were mapped, almost mathematically. Placed in quadrants, they mirrored the four directions, locked into geometric patterns that seemed to echo the cosmos overhead. Even the head count wasn't accidental. Numbers mattered. Every death, every offering, was part of a larger equation, as if the gods preferred their sacrifices to be delivered with a side of sacred geometry. Surrounding these bodies, you'd find the remains of jaguars, bones and fangs gleaming in the dim light, alongside serpent skeletons, seashells from far-off coasts, and obsidian blades that had never felt the chaos of actual battle. Figurines were placed like witnesses. The message was clear. These deaths weren't punishments. They were gifts, tributes sent straight to the gods. The men chosen for this fate weren't dying in disgrace. They were being transformed into cosmic currency, traded for the city's continued existence. To the people who built this place, constructing a temple wasn't something you could do with just sweat and stone. Every level had to be paid for in blood. Every new layer demanded another round of offerings. The deeper you dig, the more sacrifice you unearth, as if the temple itself is a monument to the endlessness of this cycle, a spiral staircase built on bodies. In one of the most unsettling discoveries, archaeologists found an elaborate tunnel running beneath the heart of the temple. This wasn't just a dirt passage hacked out by desperate hands. It was a crafted world of its own, lined with mica and flooded with mercury. The floor shimmered like a liquid mirror, reflecting your footsteps back as if the underworld itself was watching you walk. Was this tunnel supposed to be a path to the land of the dead? Was it a starlit river, a passage into the night sky? Or was it an architectural spell, binding the dead to the living and the living to the gods? The more they dug, the more it became clear. The temple wasn't just a pile of rocks built on top of death. It was designed to enclose death, to use it as mortar. The blood didn't just seep into the stones by accident. The stones were thirsty for it. Every drop, every bone, every echo in the dark was part of the bargain. This was a place where the boundary between the living and the dead wasn't just thin. It was actively being negotiated every day with ritual and terror. If you stand back and really look at the temple, you'll notice something that doesn't quite add up. It doesn't just sit on the earth like a forgotten monument. It's aligned. Its orientation isn't random, and neither is the city around it. The Avenue of the Dead, Teotihuacan's grand central boulevard, doesn't run straight north. Instead, it's tilted, a precise 15 degrees off true north. That's not the kind of error you make when you're building on a hangover. That's the kind of adjustment you make when you're tracking the sun or the stars, or something even less forgiving. The Temple of the Feathered Serpent sits right on this axis, locked into the city's cosmic grid. Why? Some say the alignment marks the setting of the Pleiades star cluster, a time when myths say the world could end or begin. Others point to Venus, the planet that obsessed Mesoamerican skywatchers. Venus, the morning and evening star, was seen as a bringer of war, sacrifice, and renewal. When Venus appeared, wars flared. When it vanished, people trembled. The temple's design, its very dimensions, seemed to echo this obsession. The repetition of 7, the number of visible planets in the ancient world, haunts its architecture. There's rhythm, symmetry, and the kind of musical math to it, as if the city itself is an instrument, tuned to the cosmos. And then you have that tunnel beneath, the one that glows in your torchlight, like a pocket of starlight trapped underground. In 2003, when archaeologists first uncovered it, what they found was a passage lined with powdered pyrite, sparkling in the dark. The effect must have been dazzling and disorienting, a deliberate illusion, turning the underworld into a night sky you could walk through. Mercury pooled along the floor, and the walls shimmered with mica. Was this a model of the Milky Way, a portal for souls, or just a way to remind the living that the dead were always nearby, just beneath your feet? At this point, the temple starts to feel less like a building and more like a cosmic device, a machine for aligning earth, sky, and spirit. Maybe even a kind of clock, counting the cycles of time, signaling when to plant, when to harvest, and, most importantly, when to bleed. Some scholars suggest that Teotihuacan's people didn't see time as a straight line, but as a wheel. Every ritual, every sacrifice, every festival was a spoke on that wheel. Death wasn't the end, it was the fuel for the next beginning. And the temple, in all its blood-soaked symmetry, was the engine turning it. But don't get too comfortable with the idea that this was all about faith and cosmic harmony. The temple wasn't just a spiritual beacon, it was a weapon. Its design was deliberate psychological warfare, engineered to overawe, intimidate, and control. Picture yourself as a visiting dignitary, arriving from some smaller, less impressive city-state. You step onto the Avenue of the Dead, and the city scale alone hits you like a punch. The endless plazas, the looming pyramids, the straight, unblinking stare of the serpent heads carved on the temple. Each one is frozen mid-strike, fangs bared, as if daring you to look away. Imagine the plaza at its busiest. Not a festival, not a market, but a ritual gathering, thousands of eyes fixed on the platform. You might witness a sacrifice, not tucked quietly away, but staged in full view. The ruling priesthood knew exactly what they were doing. Fear is power, and nothing projects fear like the threat of divine vengeance. By conducting ritual executions in broad daylight, with cosmic symbols swirling all around, they hammered home the message: we speak for the gods, and we're not afraid to spill blood to prove it. But this was no chaotic slaughter. It was performance, orchestrated down to the last feather and blade. Priests in elaborate costumes, plumed headdresses and masks of obsidian would chant and dance, their movements tightening the knot between myth and reality. Each act of sacrifice was part theater, part negotiation with the heavens. It wasn't just about showing devotion. It was about reminding everyone exactly who controlled the weather, the crops, the fate of the city. The architecture itself helped drive the point home. From the upper tiers of the temple, the city's rulers could look down on the crowd. They controlled not just the narrative, but the actual space in which it unfolded. The people below looked up, at the gods, at the rulers, at the steady drip of blood, and understood their place in the cosmic order. Outsiders, meanwhile, were left with stories to take home. Stories of a city that didn't need an army to conquer, just a temple and a well-timed spectacle. In a world where power was always one bad harvest away from collapse, Teotihuacan's leaders understood the value of awe and terror. The Temple of the Feathered Serpent was their loudest, sharpest tool. Every visitor would leave with the same message burned into their memory. Here, the gods are fed, the rulers are chosen, and the city endures because it knows how to keep the cosmic machinery running, no matter the cost. Yet even the most perfectly tuned engine can sputter, and even the most terrifying spectacle can fade. As we move forward, the story of Teotihuacan turns from power to collapse, from myth to rediscovery. And while the temple's echoes linger, another rhythm begins to pulse, a rhythm that crosses continents and centuries. Because just as the feathered serpent's legacy endures in stone, the sacred power of drumming begins to beat out its own story. At its peak, Teotihuacan was the heartbeat of Mesoamerica, a city of fire and stone, of gods and blood, a city that seemed destined to last forever. You step into Teotihuacan at its zenith, and you feel it in your bones. The city doesn't just live, it pulses. Stone avenues blaze beneath the sun, obsidian blades flash in ritual processions, and somewhere, deep in the temples, the feathered serpent coils and uncoils in painted shadow. This is not just a city. It's the gravitational center of Mesoamerica, a place that seems immune to the ordinary rot of time. But cities, especially ones that dare to play at immortality, have a knack for running out of luck. At first, the unraveling is subtle. You would have missed it if you weren't paying attention. Decades before the grand collapse, the cosmic engine that fueled Teotihuacan starts to sputter. The rains grow fickle. Crops wither and fail. The market plazas, once bursting with cacao, obsidian and feathers, begin to thin. Whispers drift through the alleys, grumblings about the priest-kings, doubts about the rituals, questions about whether the gods have lost interest. But the city's rituals keep grinding on, blood and incense mingling in the thin valley air. You, unfortunate guest that you are, can sense a tension in the air, a hairline crack running through the vast stone heart of the place. When the end finally comes, it's not a single cataclysm. It's the slow, creaking collapse of an overloaded structure, followed by the sudden snap of something vital breaking. The signs are everywhere. Archaeologists, those professional grave robbers with trowels and theories, have uncovered layers of ash strewn across the elite compounds and palatial homes. There are burned floor tiles in the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, smashed sculptures, defaced murals. All the high places where power had perched so smugly are scarred with fire and violence. But the houses of the common folk, strangely untouched. Whoever torched the city's core wasn't an invading army. This was no foreign conquest. This was an uprising from within, a rebellion that burned brightest at the very heart of the city. Picture a city built on cosmic laws, now spinning out of its own gravity. The same crowds who once watched sacrifices in trembling awe may have stormed the temples themselves, dragging down their own gods. The Temple of the Feathered Serpent, that monumental fusion of stone, myth, and authority, is ransacked. The heads of the serpent gods are chipped and battered. Ritual spaces are desecrated. Sacred fires are snuffed out with the kind of finality that leaves a chill in the air for centuries. Then comes the silence. Teotihuacan doesn't vanish overnight. Its people linger in the shadow of the ruined pyramids, but the city's animating spirit has fled. Trade falters and dies. The once vivid artwork comes to a halt. The great festivals, once capable of shaking the heavens with their noise and spectacle, fall away. The priest-kings, those self-appointed intermediaries between earth and sky, simply disappear. And the temple, once a living mouthpiece of the divine, falls mute. Yet, the story is far from over. Even as the city's body decays, its memory refuses to die. Centuries later, the Aztecs arrive in the Valley of Mexico, stumbling through fields and forests, until they find the bones of Teotihuacan protruding from the earth. Imagine their shock. Giant pyramids, weathered but defiant, staring up at the sky. The Aztecs are so awestruck that they decide the gods themselves must have built this place. They christen the ruins Teotihuacan, the place where gods are born. Without a clue about its true builders, they weave their own creation myths around its pyramids and temples. The Temple of the Feathered Serpent becomes, in their eyes, a relic of pure, unassailable truth. The irony is hard to ignore. The most powerful city of its age, engineered to embody cosmic order, fueled by blood and belief, vanishes without a single written word, without a formal record. All that's left are battered stones and the sharp, unanswered questions they raise. For 1,000 years, the gods seem to have gone silent. Teotihuacan is buried, not just in dust and volcanic debris, but in the thick fog of collective amnesia. Local farmers skirt the ruins. Children play in the fields, never suspecting the secret slumbering beneath their feet. The world forgets. That is, until the modern archaeological circus rolls into town. The 20th century brings a new breed of explorer, scientists armed with shovels, notebooks, and a thirst for lost glory. They pick at the city's bones and, piece by piece, start to reconstruct its story. The city turns out to be far older than the Aztecs ever imagined. Its layout is so precise, so cosmically aligned, that it seems less like a human settlement and more like a machine built to tune the universe. But the real bombshell isn't dropped until the late 20th and early 21st centuries. The Temple of the Feathered Serpent, that battered monument to vanished power, finally yields up its most intimate secrets. In 2011, a team of researchers discovers a sealed tunnel beneath the temple, an entrance carefully closed off nearly 18 centuries earlier, as if someone wanted to make absolutely sure no one ever crawled back in. It takes years of delicate excavation, but eventually the tunnel is breached. What lies beneath is more than just a passageway. It's a cosmic corridor, a symbolic underworld. The walls are dusted with sparkling pyrite, giving the illusion of a star-filled night. Pools of liquid mercury shimmer in the gloom, a toxic, silvery river that might have represented the primordial waters separating this world from the next. Thousands of ritual objects are scattered throughout. Jade figurines, obsidian blades, rubber balls, carved wooden masks. It feels less like a tomb and more like a message, encoded in objects rather than words. Why would the builders go to such lengths? What were they hiding, or hoping someone would one day find? Theories multiply like weeds. Some experts say the tunnel served as an initiation chamber, a stage where priest-kings and would-be gods enacted their own rebirth. Others argue it was a microcosm of creation itself, a mythological womb where the world was born, where power was forged, where cosmic order was hammered out between humans and whatever waited beyond the stars. Even the mercury, once dismissed as nothing but toxic sludge, takes on symbolic weight. To the ancient mind, it might have been the ultimate boundary, liquid mirror, veil between worlds. And woven through all these dazzling relics is a theme that refuses to die. The feathered serpent, Quetzalcoatl, never truly vanished. Even as the city withered, his image lingered, in mural fragments, in carved stone, in the geometry of the temple itself. The serpent doesn't disappear. He coils deeper into the city's bones, waiting for the right hands to uncover him. Each new artifact, every broken jawbone or gleaming ornament, pulls us a little closer to whatever message the city meant to leave behind, one carved in shadow, not in language. We like to think that modern science can lay every mystery to rest. We have X-rays, drones, ground-penetrating radar. We can map a city from orbit and count the teeth in a buried skeleton. But Teotihuacan isn't interested in surrendering all its secrets. Even now, the temple keeps its most crucial truths sealed away. It stands today as a haunting monument, not just to a lost civilization, but to a way of thinking that drew no line between power, cosmos, and death. Tourists pose for photos at the base of the pyramid. Children race past the chipped serpent heads, laughing. But the earth beneath them is soaked with stories, over 200 known human sacrifices, and countless more lost to time. Still, the temple endures. Its legacy is more than just stone and symmetry. It's psychological, spiritual, and cultural. The feathered serpent, that paradoxical god of sky and earth, survives the city's collapse and continues to evolve. The Toltecs claim him. The Aztecs remake him as Quetzalcoatl, a gentler deity, the weeping god who brings knowledge and promises to return. Myths don't die. They mutate, adapt, slip into new skins. Even today, you see the feathered serpent's shadow flicker in Mexican art, in murals, in literature, in the emblems stamped on coins and government buildings. He's become a symbol of mystery, of ancient genius, and of the wild spiritual energy that once electrified Mesoamerica. But there's another legacy, one that sits heavier on the conscience. The Temple of the Feathered Serpent is a monument to the price of belief. It asks sharp questions. How far will humans go to touch the divine? What happens when power and faith become indistinguishable? Can beauty grow in the same soil as terror? The temple is more than a ruin. It's a mirror, held up to our face. It reflects our obsession with what comes after death, our hunger for meaning, and the strange double-edged gift of being able to build wonders and stain them with blood. Teotihuacan teaches us that greatness is always shadowed by secrets. Civilizations can reach for the stars, but they always leave something buried beneath the stones. Maybe that's why you and everyone else keep returning. Not just to gawk, but to understand. Because deep down, you sense that the serpent is still watching, not waiting to strike, but to remind. Remind us of what we were and what we might still become. Long before any of this, Before anyone built ziggurats or carved gods out of stone, there was something else. Something older than language, older than myth. Before we spoke in words, we spoke in rhythm. Picture a circle of ancient humans huddled around a fire, hands slapping hollow logs, sticks tapping stones, feet stomping the dirt in time. That first drumbeat wasn't called music. It wasn't called anything. But it was felt, deep and immediate, a spark of intention, a heartbeat broadcast across the darkness. Anthropologists have traced the origins of percussion instruments back more than 30,000 years. The earliest drums were humble things, tree trunks, hollowed gourds, stretched skins. Nothing gold-plated, nothing built to last. But even these primitive drums mattered. They weren't toys. They weren't for show. They were for warning, for summoning, for connecting. Imagine living in a world where your only alarm system is the crack of a drum echoing through the trees. One thunderous beat, and the whole tribe knows. Danger, celebration, or maybe the gods themselves are listening. The earliest drums weren't just tools. They were extensions of the human body, a heartbeat made audible, a pulse you could feel in your chest from a mile away. Drumming wasn't a spectator sport. It was communal. You didn't listen, you participated. Around the fire, under the stars, in echoing caves where the air itself vibrated with sound, rhythm became a language all its own. Joy, grief, hope, warning, none of it needed words. The pattern of sound said everything that mattered. Before anyone ever carved a flute or strung a bow, the drum was already alive, anchoring ceremonies, giving shape to ritual, drawing scattered individuals into something like a tribe. In its way, the drum was humanity's first instrument, and maybe its first collective identity. No matter where you are on the planet, you'll find it, someone, somewhere, making something to strike, something to beat, something to mark the moment. Even in the absence of words, rhythm endures, and rhythm is everything. In the earliest civilizations, the drum was never just an instrument. It was a sacred voice, a living spirit. Every tribe, every culture, every forgotten corner of the earth developed its own rhythms. The purpose, though, was nearly universal, to commune with the unseen. In Africa, some of the oldest drums, the djembe, carved from a single tree and wrapped in goatskin, were believed to hold three spirits. The tree itself, the animal whose hide became the drumhead, and the craftsman who shaped it. Played in circles, the djembe wasn't just an accompaniment, it was the ritual itself. Then there were the talking drums of West Africa, hourglass-shaped marvels that could bend pitch and mimic speech. Entire villages communicated across great distances, relaying news, warnings, births and deaths, all through the language of rhythm. Long before anyone dreamed up a telephone, humans were drumming their messages through the wilderness. Across the wide oceans, Native American tribes treated the drum as the heartbeat of Mother Earth. Played in ceremonies to honor ancestors, summon healing, or guide souls on their journey. The large powwow drum became a communal pulse, a spiritual engine that could align humans with nature and whatever spirits lurked just out of sight. In Australia, Aboriginal peoples used clapsticks and percussive stomps during Dreamtime rituals, binding themselves to the mythic age of creation. In the Arctic, Inuit shamans struck frame drums to slip into trance, seeking visions or communicating with spirits during the long, frozen dark. None of this was performance. It was survival. It was remembrance. It was belonging. To drum was to remember. To drum was to belong. And always, drumming was communal. Drums brought people together in sacred circles, synchronizing hearts, intentions, and breath. There was no need for sheet music, no demand for stages, just bodies moving, hands striking, souls stirring, all bound together by rhythm. No matter where you stood in the world, if you heard a drum in the distance, you knew something sacred was happening, something that words alone could never express. And so, the legacy of the feathered serpent isn't just in the stones of Teotihuacan or the myths that echo through the ages. It's in the rhythmic pulse that unites us, even now. The beat goes on, ancient and eternal, carrying memories, secrets, and the persistent hope that, with each strike, we're reaching for the divine. Of course, as your ever-cynical time travel concierge, I should warn you, not every drumbeat is just a call to the gods or a friendly neighborhood rhythm circle. Sometimes, the power of rhythm takes a much darker turn. From sacred circles to bloody battlefields, the drum has always spoken. Step into the world's oldest command center, and you'll notice something missing. Walkie-talkies, megaphones, smartphones. Instead, you get the thunderous certainty of a drum, your ancient version of a group text, but with more existential dread. Whether you're huddled in a smoky tent on the Eurasian steppe, or packed shoulder to shoulder in a stone-walled city, its voice slices through confusion. Sometimes it soothes, more often, it issues orders you'd be foolish to ignore. As civilizations flexed into kingdoms and empires, the humble drum shed its skin as a mere musical instrument. It became a badge of authority, a tool for enforcing order, and, when necessary, an agent of pure tactical terror. Imagine the earliest armies. No radio operators, no scrolling TikTok feeds to pass the time before battle. Instead, you hear the unmistakable boom of a war drum. In ancient China, these were the colossal bow drums. Their sound didn't just echo off the hills, it rolled over entire armies. One thunderous strike, and thousands of soldiers knew to advance, retreat, or pivot, all without a single shouted word. Each rhythm was its own encrypted message, drilled into the bones of every fighter. Even in the chaos of arrows and dust, they could pick out the pattern and move as one living machine. Jump to the brick and mud temples of Mesopotamia, where drums served as the original public address system. When a ruler wanted to summon the people or announce a new edict, the temple drums sent vibrations rippling down city streets. But when the enemy threatened, those same drums became instruments of dread. The relentless, rolling thunder projected over city walls, designed to unnerve attackers before swords were ever drawn. The message was clear. You're not just facing soldiers, you're up against something ancient and implacable. Drums in these moments weren't background noise. They were psychological warfare, a sonic wall between chaos and order. The Romans, never once to miss a good cymbal, took the drum off the battlefield and put it in the parade. Their tympanum, a frame drum, was less about rallying troops and more about projecting imperial discipline. You'd see it in processions, in religious cults like that of Cybele, its beat more ceremonial than strategic. Still, the sound carried weight, a constant reminder of Rome's unyielding order. It was rhythm as propaganda, every beat an echo of the empire's heartbeat. But if you want to experience the full, weaponized power of the drum, you need to find yourself facing the Ottoman Empire. Their meta bands weren't just musical ensembles. They were the world's first military orchestras, and their job description was simple: terrify the opposition. Picture this. Before the first arrow is loosed, the air is already shaking with waves of sound. Kettle drums so massive you feel them in your gut, cymbals crashing, double-headed bass drums pounding out a rhythm that makes your teeth chatter. Some European soldiers reportedly froze in place, so overwhelmed by this auditory onslaught that their bodies refused to obey. Paralyzed by a storm of rhythm, they became casualties before the first sword was drawn. The Ottomans had figured out how to weaponize awe, turning music into a tactical advantage. Of course, the drum's power didn't vanish when the fighting stopped. In royal courts from Kyoto to Benin, from London to Istanbul. Drum ensembles marked the moments that mattered. Arrivals, coronations, executions, treaties, if it was important. It got a drum beat. To beat the drum was to declare, in no uncertain terms, that power was in the room. In many courts, only the elite or their chosen heralds could command the drums. For a few thunderous moments, the room belonged to them, and everyone knew it. But drums also spoke in resistance. On plantations in the Americas, enslaved people took up drums not just for solace, but for subversion. Rhythmic patterns became coded language, a way to preserve culture or orchestrate rebellion out of earshot of their captors. Even in the harshest environments, the drum refused to be silenced. Its rhythms carried the memory of freedom, the promise of defiance. The beat could mean prayer, warning, or uprising all at once. So what's the message, really? No matter the context, when the drum speaks, it claims space and authority. It says, "This is who rules. This is who marches. This is the rhythm you must follow." It's not just music, it's a living declaration of power itself. As the world's civilizations splintered and sprawled across continents, their drum beats shifted in every possible direction. Each culture bent rhythm to its own philosophy. In the East, drums became instruments of discipline, ceremony, and spiritual clarity. Think of Japanese taiko drumming, giant, lacquered drums, played with the precision of martial artists, each movement choreographed, each strike a physical meditation. During Shinto rituals or theater performances, the taiko's deep voice travels through the valleys, summoning gods or scaring away bad spirits. In these moments, rhythm isn't just sound, it's an invitation for the divine to descend. The drummer's body becomes the drum's own avatar, grounded and unwavering. Head south to Indonesia, and the kendang drum is calling the shots in the gamelan orchestra. Here, rhythm is less about brute force, and more about weaving together melodies and movements. The kendang leads not just musicians, but dancers, priests, and festival-goers, holding ceremonies together with a pulse that feels cosmic. The layers of rhythm are so interlocked, they can make your head spin. It's less like a marching band, and more like a sonic constellation, each part glittering in its own orbit, yet moving as one. Meanwhile, in India, the tabla becomes something else entirely. The tabla isn't just an accessory. It's a language, a system with words, grammar, and poetry. Every stroke has a name and a story, each pattern a phrase that can be recited as well as played. Mastering the tabla requires years of listening, speaking, and responding, because here, rhythm is as much conversation as it is music. In classical concerts and devotional gatherings, the tabla player isn't just keeping time, but telling a story in syllables and sound. In contrast, in the West, drums were shaped by function and force. For centuries, European drums were mostly utilitarian, beating out time for soldiers, signaling changes during battle, enforcing daily routines. The drum was a sergeant, not a poet. It wasn't until the Renaissance and Baroque periods that drums started slipping into orchestras, their thunder rumbling under royal fanfares or echoing through cavernous cathedrals. Yet even then, they rarely took the spotlight. Drums in the West were the backbone, keeping everyone in line rather than leading the dance. So you see this split. In the East, rhythm is breath, prayer, and living art. In the West, it's order, structure, and the machinery of power. Two halves of the world, two philosophies of the beat, but always one truth. Drums shape our sense of time, ritual, and authority. They set the place for empires and ceremonies alike, connecting people in ways that no spoken language ever could. But the story doesn't stop with court or battlefield. In Africa, the drum transcends both. It isn't just an object, it's a spiritual being. In Yoruba tradition, for example, the bata drum isn't played so much as invoked. The drummer becomes a priest. The rhythm a coded prayer, each beat a message to the gods or ancestors. The drum's voice is believed to call the Orushas down from the heavens, inviting them to join the festival or the rite. Every pattern has intent. Every silence is as meaningful as the beat. The drum isn't just part of the ritual, it is the ritual. Across South Asia, the drum appears even in the hands of gods. Picture Shiva as Nataraja, caught in his endless dance of creation and destruction. In his palm, he wields the damaru, a tiny hourglass drum whose pulse represents the heartbeat of the cosmos. Each tap is the universe, breathing in, breathing out, a cycle of birth and dissolution. The drum here is more than an instrument. It's a cosmic metronome, keeping time for everything that ever was or will be. In Buddhist monasteries, the ritual frame drum keeps watch over the breath of the faithful. Its soft, steady strikes guide monks through chants and meditation, a gentle reminder to return, again and again, to the present moment. There's no fanfare, no bravado, just the slow grounding beat, the pulse of the now. If you ever find yourself in one of these quiet ceremonies, you'll realize the drum doesn't need to shout to command attention. Sometimes the simplest rhythm is the most powerful of all. Cross the oceans to the Americas, and you'll find drums at the center of vision quests, sweat lodges, healing ceremonies. For many indigenous nations, the drumbeat mimics the pulse of the womb, steady and reassuring, guiding participants into trance or communion with ancestors. In these moments, the drum is not accompaniment, it is the ceremony itself, the bridge between the seen and unseen worlds. And even in Christianity, where rhythm was often treated with suspicion, drums still carved out sacred space. In black gospel churches, the drum became the backbone of praise, a heartbeat driving songs of hope, struggle, and transcendence. Every Sunday, the sanctuary vibrates with the energy of lives lived in rhythm, faith, and defiance. The drum here is equal parts celebration and protest, a reminder that the sacred is never far from the everyday. So whether it's announcing kings, terrifying armies, summoning gods, or binding communities under the weight of oppression, the drum is always more than a musical accessory. It's the vessel that carries intention, mystery, and power. When words fail, rhythm remains, and in that persistent, unyielding beat, the world listens, and the divine, perhaps, answers. But as time marched on and technology crept in, the drum's story took yet another turn. Next, we'll watch as solitary drums give way to wild inventions and digital revolutions, and the simple act of keeping time becomes a worldwide language all its own. For countless generations, drums existed as solitary creatures, one drummer, one drum, one primal purpose. You could almost picture yourself hunched over a battered animal hide, coaxing out rhythms that echoed through mud brick alleys or across arid plains. But then, as the gears of the Industrial Revolution began to grind, the world's tempo shifted. Factories belched steam, city streets throbbed with new energy, and suddenly, percussion wasn't content to remain simple. In the swirl of the late 19th century, necessity became the mother of reinvention. Picture yourself squeezed into a dimly lit theatre, the orchestra pit barely large enough for a pair of cellists and a disgruntled oboist, let alone a squadron of percussionists with their own sprawling arsenal. Budgets were laughable. Real estate was even tighter. So drummers did what humans always do when faced with constraints. They improvised. Instead of assigning one person to each drum, they began to huddle their instruments together, stacking toms with snares, bells with blocks, fashioning a Frankenstein's monster of percussion. By 1909, someone had a stroke of genius and patented the first bass drum pedal. Suddenly, you could slam your foot down and summon thunder while your hands stayed free to dance elsewhere. It was like discovering the cheat code to rhythm itself. The idea caught on like wildfire. Over the next decades, the drum kit mutated. Hi-hats arrived, tom-toms multiplied, cowbells and ride cymbals joined the party. The seat behind the kit became less a stool and more a throne. You weren't just a timekeeper. You were a one-person percussion army, the puppet master of pulse. And then came jazz, breathing life into the drum kit with the force of a hurricane. Imagine yourself packed into a smoky New Orleans club, the air thick with sweat and cigarette haze. The drummer isn't just marking time. They're bending it, swinging it, throwing it off cliffs and catching it again in midair. Legends like Gene Krupa and Buddy Rich didn't just play the drums, they conversed with them, coaxed stories out of wood and metal, made rhythm as expressive as any horn solo. The kit became a voice, syncopated and sensitive, singing and shouting all at once. As jazz mutated into rock, the drum kit grew even more monstrous. The 60s and 70s brought towers of toms, forests of cymbals, double bass pedals for the truly ambitious. You can picture John Bonham unleashing avalanches, Neil Peart mapping out impossible time signatures, Keith Moon detonating chaos with a grin. The drummer was no longer hiding in the background. They were the engine, the locomotive, the reason the music moved at all. And as the decades rolled on, the drum kit's empire only expanded. Gospel choirs in packed churches, punk bands in graffiti-stained garages, DJs on neon-lit world tours. The drum kit became a global passport, a universal language with 10 voices, all wielded by one pair of hands and feet. But the drum's journey didn't stop there. Across continents and centuries, it reinvented itself over and over, rarely content with a single identity. In West Africa, for instance, the djembe remains the heartbeat of community gatherings. Its voice is sharp, speaking through cracking slaps and booming bass, narrating stories that are half dance, half dialogue. The dunan, sitting close by, anchors the ensemble with a pulse that seems to draw dancers into its gravitational field. Here, drumming isn't just music. It's a spiritual negotiation, a chat with ancestors, a direct line to the invisible world. Shift east, and you're sitting cross-legged in a Middle Eastern courtyard. Someone hands you a darbuka, a goblet-shaped drum forged from clay or metal, and suddenly you're responsible for rhythms that can make hips sway or halt an entire room. The darbuka's voice is crystalline and quick, demanding precision and, frankly, a level of wrist dexterity you didn't realize you lacked. These are the rhythms of belly dances, wedding feasts, and whispered prayers, all contained in a single drum. Cross the Atlantic, and the drum's DNA mutates again. In the Caribbean and Latin America, you'll find yourself swept up by the conga, the bongo, the timbale. These drums are more than instruments. They're artifacts of survival, forged at the crossroads of Africa, indigenous America, and colonial Spain. In Cuba, the sacred batar drums don't just accompany music, they summon gods, their patterns speaking a coded language to the orishas. In Brazil, the surdo and cueca don't just drive samba, they fuel whole carnivals, turning city blocks into molten rivers of rhythm, joy, and protest. Travel to India, and the drums become mathematicians. The miridangam and tabla aren't just thumped, they're tuned, manipulated, coaxed into melodic phrases with surgical precision. Each finger stroke is a syllable, each phrase a centuries-old story. These are not instruments for the faint of heart. They demand discipline, reverence, and a willingness to let the drum lead. The tabla's crisp cascading sounds and the mesridangam's resonant booms are woven into the fabric of Indian classical music, blurring the boundary between rhythm and melody until you can't tell one from the other. And then there's the frame drum, the world's oldest minimalist. It pops up everywhere, from Persian dafs to Irish baudrans, from shamanic ceremonies to folk festivals. Played with fingertips, brushes, or soft mallets, its simplicity is its power. This is the drum you'd find tucked under the arm of a traveling bard or a village healer. Proof that you don't need bombast to make something sacred. What ties all these drums together isn't just wood and skin, it's purpose. Every drum, no matter its shape or birthplace, is a cultural fingerprint. It's crafted from whatever materials are at hand, shaped by the climate, the customs, and the needs of its people. Some guide dancers, some heal wounds, some call down rain or revolution, but all of them carry the weight of history, geography, and identity in every beat. The drum family is as diverse as humanity itself, but it's also the most universal club you'll ever join. No matter where you step on this planet, the ground echoes with rhythm. You can't escape it, and why would you want to? But as the 20th century limped toward its end, a new sound began to seep in. Not a change in rhythm, but in texture. The tactile, the tangible, the sweaty grip on a drumstick. These started to give ground to the hum of electricity, the click of plastic pads. Enter the age of digital drums. It started tentatively in the 1970s, with early drum machines like the Rhythmicon and the Roland CR78. At first, these machines sounded sterile, almost apologetic, their beats as stiff as a tax accountant at a rave. But musicians, ever the opportunists, saw something else. Control, consistency, infinite possibility. And then, in 1980, the world got the Roland TR-8, a drum machine, so iconic, its deep subsonic kick and snappy snare became the heartbeat of entire genres. Without the 808, hip-hop doesn't exist the way you know it. Neither does techno, electro, or trap. Suddenly, it wasn't about mimicking a real drum anymore. It was about inventing new sounds, new worlds. The 808 didn't try to be human. It was unapologetically machine, and that was the point. As the digital wave gathered momentum, tools evolved too. Electronic drum kits, like Roland V drums, let you play with the nuance of a real kit, but with a flick of a switch, you could morph into a jazz combo, a stadium rocker, or an alien spaceship commander. You could practice without pissing off your neighbors, record without a single microphone, and change your entire drum sound in the time it takes to blink. And then came computers, and with them a new kind of temple, the digital audio workstation. Ableton, FL Studio, Logic. These became the new altar stones for bedroom producers and world-class artists alike. Now, with nothing but a laptop and a pair of headphones, you could layer kicks, snares, hats, and sub-bass into endless, mind-bending rhythms. Finger drumming on MIDI pads rose up as a whole new art form, equal parts choreography and code. Some purists howled that this was the end. Machines would murder the soul of drumming, replacing human swing with quantized monotony. But the obituary was premature. What emerged wasn't a funeral, but a hybrid. Acoustic drummers started wiring up triggers and samples, creating mutant kits that could sound like anything, from a thunderstorm to a video game. Producers layered hand-played drums with digital beats, blending the organic with the synthetic. The result wasn't subtraction, it was multiplication. Digital drums didn't erase tradition, they reimagined it, injected it with new life. Now we live in a world where a single person, hunched over a MIDI controller, can conjure rhythms that once took an army of musicians. Ancient grooves from Africa or Asia or the Americas get sampled, twisted, and resurrected in packed nightclubs and on streaming platforms, their DNA spliced with neon and nostalgia. The tools have changed, but the mission is the same: to move bodies, shape time, and make silence into something you can feel in your bones. Across all these eras, every culture, every technological leap, one thing stubbornly refuses to change. The drum is still our oldest voice. From firelit circles to stadium spotlights, from temple ceremonies to subway buskers. The drum has always been about more than music. It's about connection to each other, to ourselves, to something we can't quite name, but always want to touch. And this isn't just poetic license, it's literal. Before you ever took your first breath, nestled in amniotic darkness, the rhythm you heard was your mother's heartbeat. Steady, reassuring, alive. That's the first rhythm, the original drum. And we spend the rest of our lives chasing it, trying to recapture that sense of belonging, of safety, of being part of something larger than ourselves. Drums have kept us company through every shade of human experience. In grief, we drum to mourn. In joy, we drum to celebrate. In protest, we drum to demand change. In worship, we drum to reach for the divine. The drum has marched beside kings and rebels alike, echoed off temple walls and subway tiles, spoken every language without needing words. It bypasses the mind and speaks straight to the body, the bones, the bloodstream. It's the only universal language that everyone understands, even if you can't carry a tune in a bucket. And as technology marches on, percussion keeps evolving. Street musicians spin new rhythms on handpans, their metallic melodies floating over city noise. Indigenous drummers fight to preserve traditions in a world allergic to patience. Stadium drummers whip crowds into a frenzy, while toddlers bang pots and pans in kitchens, discovering rhythm with sticky fingers and unfiltered joy. Even artificial intelligence is learning to keep time. But for all its number-crunching power, an algorithm can't fake the shaky human feel of a beat played just off the grid. Rhythm isn't just counted, it's felt, lived, suffered through, celebrated, breathed. Maybe that's why drums endure when empires collapse and trends flicker out. Deep down, we all crave an anchor, a shared pulse, something to remind us that we exist together, right now, in this moment. No matter how advanced our gadgets become, or how virtual our parties get, there's something grounding, almost sacred, about the slap of skin on skin, the crack of wood on hide, the resonance that lingers in the air. It's a beat, a breath, a beginning. The drum isn't a relic, it's a reminder. We were always meant to move together, to listen, to respond, to play. As long as there's a heartbeat anywhere on this planet, the drum will never fall silent. And so, as the last echo of a drum beat fades, you sense another kind of rhythm stirring. A pulse not born in animal hide or digital code, but in stone and steel, ambition and anxiety. Because just as the world's music was being reshaped, another revolution was brewing, this time in the skyline of a restless island. Before Manhattan became a forest of glass and steel, it was an island of shadows, not cast by towers, but by church steeples and sloping rooftops. Picture yourself stepping onto the southern tip of Manhattan, sometime in the early 1800s. There are no glimmering towers slicing the sky, no shimmering glass reflecting the sun into your eyes. Instead, overhead, the angled silhouettes of church spires and the modest peaks of gabled rooftops define the skyline. The skyline is more suggestion than spectacle, a city not yet obsessed with altitude. In these days, Manhattan's buildings hardly dare to climb. 5 or 6 stories is the ceiling for almost every structure, not because New Yorkers lack nerve, but because gravity is the city's most ruthless building inspector. Every brick and stone comes with a tax. The higher you build, the heavier your burden becomes. Stone and brick are unforgiving. If you want to reach for the sky, your walls have to be thick enough at the base to carry the weight above. That means less room for people or products, more money sunk into materials, and ever more daunting foundations. It's not a lack of wild ambition that keeps Manhattan flat. It's the cold math of mass and money. So the city sprawls instead of soars, inching north in a checkerboard of streets and avenues. In 1811, the city planners hatched a grid so audacious It seems almost clinical in its logic, slicing the island into neat rectangles long before skyscrapers were even a fever dream. But here's the twist. Beneath all the mud, cobblestone, and confusion, Manhattan is hiding something priceless. Tucked under the city's nervous feet is a backbone of granite, bedrock, deep and resolute. It's silent for now, buried and biding its time, but one day it will become the unyielding foundation for the world's tallest daydreams. For now, though, the island is bustling but low-slung. The piers are jammed with creaking ships, the markets are choked with shouts and smells, and the streets ring with the clatter of hooves and the curses of teamsters. Immigration is swelling the city's ranks. The docks are alive with hope and hustle. But no one is looking out for inspiration. Manhattan hugs the ground, as if afraid the sky might notice. The largest vertical statement in these years is Trinity Church. Its spire, finished in 1846, stabs upward more than 280 feet, a marvel for a moment, the tallest thing for miles. But even here, its symbolism, more than skyline, a solitary finger pointing at what could be, not what is. What none of these bustling merchants, dockhands, or priests realize is that the future of Manhattan's horizon isn't written in stone or wood. Something radical is waiting just beyond the edge of this era. The real skyline will be shaped by iron, steel, and the kind of fevered vision that gets you laughed out of respectable company. The ground won't be the limit much longer. The city of towers is coming, but for now the stage is just being swept. The players are gathering, and the island is holding its breath. Think of gravity for a moment as the ultimate city planner. It keeps everyone honest. It keeps your apartment on the 4th floor cheap, and your dreams of penthouse grandeur safely out of reach. For centuries, the laws of physics shaped Manhattan's ambitions as surely as any mayor or mogul. But then, in the stubborn, soot-streaked heart of the 19th century, two inventions conspire to snap that leash. One invention will lift the people, the other will lift the buildings. The first breakthrough arrives in 1852, courtesy of Elisha Otis, a man who knows that trust is earned with spectacle. At the New York Crystal Palace, Otis stands on a wooden platform, suspended high above a crowd of onlookers itching for a good disaster. With a theatrical flourish, he commands his assistant to cut the single rope holding the platform. The crowd gasps, certain they're about to witness a very public flattening. Instead, Otis's safety mechanism snaps into place, and he remains serenely aloft. It's a magic trick for the industrial age. Suddenly, climbing isn't a punishment, it's a privilege. Top floors go from being the least desirable, stair-haunted backwaters, to prime real estate, offering sunlight, fresh breezes, and most importantly, status. The vertical city finally makes economic sense. Of course, being able to move people upward is only half the battle. Buildings themselves are still shackled to tradition, load-bearing walls that balloon in thickness with every added floor, making true height a fool's errand. That's when innovation number 2 arrives to turn the tables. In the late 1800s, engineers mastered the art of the steel skeleton. No longer must a building's exterior shoulder all the weight. Thin, graceful curtain walls can hang from a steel frame that does the heavy lifting. This is not evolution, it's architectural revolution. Suddenly, the question isn't, how high can you build before it collapses? It's how high do you dare? The tools are ready, the materials are on deck, and Manhattan's geology is practically begging for someone to test its limits. The island's crowded footprint forces everyone to think vertically. There's no more room to spread, so the only way is up. And with Wall Street booming, every bank, newspaper, and would-be titan wants to see their name in the clouds. The elevator cracks open the sky. The steel frame builds the ladder to climb it. Together, they don't just change how buildings look, They rewrite the very idea of what a city is for. The skyline becomes a scoreboard for ambition, a vertical contest where the winners are measured in stories, not just fortunes. Now the real race begins, no longer outward but upward. By the turn of the 20th century, your Manhattan itinerary is no longer horizontal. Forget sprawling brownstones or elbowing your way through a tangle of noisy markets. You, unwilling VIP that you are about to be hoisted right along with the city's soaring ambitions. The ground beneath your feet is packed tighter than a rush-hour subway car, and the only direction left for a city with this much ego is up. Steel has become the new bedrock, elevators, the arteries of progress. Suddenly, the skyline isn't just scenery. It's a gladiatorial arena, and every new tower is a throwdown. Who dares to scrape the sky higher? The first follies of this architectural arms race echo in the 1890s, when Joseph Pulitzer's New York World building throws its hat into the ring. 20 stories of brick and bravado tower above Park Row, making other office buildings feel positively short and sheepish. For a moment, Pulitzer's empire rules the clouds. Then the Park Row building muscles in, stretching to 3091 feet and stealing the crown in 1899. Each new skyscraper is less a building than a billboard, a steel and stone press release shouting, "We're not just rich, we're immortal." As the 20th century dawns, the competition only intensifies. Foundations are blasted into granite as steam shovels and riveters turn the city's bedrock into a launch pad for ambition. Workers, many of them fresh off ships from Europe, balance on narrow beams, their boots dusted with iron filings, their courage the only safety harness. Above them, each new tower is a gauntlet thrown before the world. In 1908, the Singer building rises like a needle, poking 612 feet into the clouds and finally eclipsing the spire of Trinity Church, which had lorded over the city for half a century. But in New York, nothing stays on top for long. Just 5 years later, in 1913, the Woolworth building bursts onto the scene. Funded in cash by Frank W. Woolworth himself, because what's the point of being a retail titan if you can't pay in full? The Woolworth soars 792 feet, 55 stories of neo-Gothic fantasy. Designed by Cass Gilbert, it's crowned the Cathedral of Commerce, and walking through its marble lobby feels less like entering an office and more like being anointed into a secular priesthood. The building glows at night, its illuminated crown a beacon to the city's restless dreamers and dealmakers. But don't be fooled by the stained glass and flying buttresses. This is less about piety and more about PR. The battle for the tallest building is branding warfare at its most ruthless. Corporations and institutions aren't just buying square footage, they're engraving their names onto the city's DNA. Every new record is a front-page spectacle. Every jagged silhouette is a power play. The skyline itself becomes the ultimate scoreboard, updated in rivets and limestone. Below, the tempo of progress is relentless. Foundations are dug so deep that old New York's bones, layers of Dutch cobblestones and colonial debris, get churned up and discarded. Steam engines roar, steel beams clang, and the city's future takes shape one vertigo-inducing story at a time. Immigrant workers, faces smeared with sweat and dust, swing hammers high above the city, every heartbeat a drumroll for the next leap skyward. Then the 1920s arrive, and the skyline shifts from raw muscle to pure choreography. The age of Art Deco is here. Now, the competition isn't just about height, it's about seduction. The Jazz Age pours its cocktail of style and swagger right into the city's blueprints. Towers begin to move, at least in spirit, curves and chevrons slicing the air, sunlight glancing off chrome and glass. The skyline no longer just climbs, it dances, pirouetting above the chaos below. Enter the Chrysler Building, the ultimate showboat. commissioned by automobile mogul Walter Chrysler. The building is a 1,046-foot thunderbolt, a temple to speed and shine. Its spire, crafted in secret and hoisted into place under cover of darkness, erupts skyward like a magician's final trick. Ornamental eagles, modeled after Chrysler hood ornaments, flare down from the corners, daring the city to keep up. The Art Deco crown, all radiant arcs and triangular windows, catches the sunrise like a sequined tiara. The Chrysler doesn't just reach for the clouds, it flirts with them, winking at the heavens with every glint of polished steel. But don't get comfortable. The race is never over. Just as the Chrysler building claims the title, another Goliath rises a few blocks away. The Empire State Building, born during the darkest days of the Great Depression, doesn't just break records, it obliterates them. In 1931, after just 410 days of non-stop labor, more than 3,400 workers have stacked 102 stories and 1,050 feet of steel and stone atop the city's collective anxiety. The Empire State isn't a building, it's a dare. A message to the world that New York doesn't retreat, even when the rest of the country is buckling under the weight of breadlines and lost savings. The building's silhouette, all setbacks and thrust, becomes the visual shorthand for American resilience, optimism, and, let's be honest, a certain mania for one-upmanship. The Art Deco skyscrapers of this era are more than just functional office blocks. They're sculpted statements, equal parts monument and marketing. Their facades ripple with geometric patterns and mythic symbols. At night, they glow from within, casting halos over the city's insomnia. Their lobbies are mosaics of marble and brass, whispered promises that anyone, immigrant, industrialist, or interloper, can ascend, if only they have the nerve. But beneath all the stylized glamour, there's a raw hunger. These towers are the offspring of barons and tycoons who want more than profit. They want permanence. Each building is a stake in the ground, or, more accurately, the clouds, a declaration that their names will outlast eras, trends, and even the city itself. By the late 1930s, the Manhattan skyline has solidified into a mythic silhouette. It's not merely a cluster of buildings, it's a cathedral to ambition, a sermon in stone and steel. After the Second World War, the mood shifts. The Jazz Age fizzles. The Great Depression fades into memory. Now, the city's priorities are colder, sharper, more corporate. The intricate ornamentation of Art Deco falls away, replaced by the sleek, unyielding faces of glass and steel. America is flexing its new muscles as a global superpower, and New York has become the command center of the modern world. The skyline adapts with ruthless efficiency. The new towers don't seduce the sky, they subdue it. The United Nations headquarters goes up in 1952, a stark slab of glass along the East River, flanked by marble wings that radiate diplomatic order. The building isn't just architecture, it's an announcement. New York is now the meeting place of the planet. The city skyline is no longer just American. It's global, atomic age, and ready for anything. On the heels of the UN building come the Lever House and the Seagram building, completed in the 1950s. These are temples to the international style, their curtain walls of reflective glass and pristine steel as emotionless as a banker's handshake. Ornament is out, discipline is in. The Seagram building, designed by Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, is especially influential. Its bronze glass skin and mathematically precise grid turn Park Avenue into a corridor of sleek anonymity. The building doesn't try to impress with decoration. Its only message is power, projected with a calm so absolute, it's almost chilling. This is the era of corporate architecture, a time when skyscrapers are less about personality and more about presence. Midtown Manhattan becomes a chessboard for titans of finance, media, and law. Towers compete not for beauty, but for square footage and a sharper reflection of the skyline in their mirrored facades. The whimsical spires and stone gargoyles of the past are replaced by anonymous giants, their identities hidden behind grids of glass. These buildings are machines, built for efficiency, precision, and the relentless churning of capital. Yet for all their coldness, these towers still speak volumes. They tell the story of a nation obsessed with order, expansion, and the appearance of progress. The skyline, once a chorus of wild ambition, now murmurs in the language of balance sheets and quarterly earnings. Beauty is no longer shouted from the rooftops. It's whispered through air-conditioned boardrooms. By the late 1960s, New York's skyline is a finished symphony of steel and glass, a vertical masterpiece. But the city's appetite for transformation remains insatiable. The next big dream begins to take shape at the southern tip of Manhattan, where a pair of identical towers will soon upend everything that came before. Their arrival will be nothing short of seismic. This is the birth of the World Trade Center. Conceived as a new hub for global commerce, the towers are the brainchild of the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. Architect Minoru Yamasaki is given the challenge of reimagining the skyline for a new age. His solution is radical: twin monoliths, each 1,000 feet tall. Their aluminum-clad bodies edged with vertical lines, no setbacks, no distractions. The towers don't taper or dance. They stand shoulder to shoulder, blunt and unwavering. To make room, an entire neighborhood, Radio Row, is wiped off the map, its shops and warehouses bulldozed into memory. The engineering behind the towers is as ambitious as their scale. The foundations require a technique called the slurry wall, a process that lets builders carve deep into the soft riverbed without inviting the Hudson in for an unplanned swim. It's one of the most complex engineering feats the city has ever seen. When the World Trade Center opens in 1973, the reaction is mixed. Some critics call the towers sterile, too boxy, devoid of the personality that made the Chrysler and Empire State legendary. Others lament the loss of the old skyline, with its ornamented peaks and flamboyant crowns. But for millions, the Twin Towers become instant icons, a pair of colossal exclamation points anchoring lower Manhattan. They don't dance with the skyline. They dominate it, radiating confidence and certainty in a world that seems to demand both. The towers are more than real estate. They're a new kind of temple, one dedicated not to gods or kings, but to commerce, connectivity, and American might. Observation decks draw tourists from every continent, while the famous Windows on the World restaurant serves up panoramic views with a side of capitalistic bravado. For nearly 30 years, the Twin Towers defined the city's silhouette. They give the skyline symmetry, weight, and a sense of permanence that seems, in the moment, unbreakable. Other cities might reach higher in the years to come, but none can match the symbolic heft of these two sentinels rising above the harbor. With their arrival, New York's skyline is transformed yet again, not through artistry or ornament, but through sheer, unyielding ambition. And yet, even as the towers claim their place in the clouds, their story, like that of every giant before them, reminds us that nothing in this city is ever truly permanent. The skyline, for all its steel and swagger, is always a work in progress. And so, as you look up at the Twin Towers, the Manhattan skyline feels settled, almost invincible. But beneath the calm, change is already rumbling. Because on the morning of September 11th, 2001, the Manhattan skyline changed forever. Let's step out onto the Manhattan sidewalk with you, one crisp September morning in 2001, when the skyline, your skyline, the one you thought you could sketch in your sleep, shifted in an instant. Only this time, it wasn't the usual ballet of cranes and steel beams, adding another glassy tooth to the horizon. No, this was a day of violence, smoke, and sudden absence. In less than 2 hours, the Twin Towers, those colossal slabs that once anchored Lower Manhattan, were gone, reduced to roaring clouds of ash, fire, and tangled steel. Thousands of lives finished in a blink, and the 2 pillars that had always stood as the city's signature vanished. The blow wasn't just against bricks or mortar. It was a strike at the heart of what the towers meant: commerce, modernity, the relentless grind upwards, and the myth of freedom. For decades, those monolithic twins were the exclamation mark at the bottom of the island, the shorthand for New York's ego. Suddenly, the skyline looked broken, incomplete, like a sentence cut off mid-thought. In the days after, Lower Manhattan didn't just feel wounded. It was a wound. The air hung heavy with the taste of smoke and something more metallic, more bitter. Instead of height and light, there was a raw, echoing absence. Every photograph, every glance south felt hollow. The familiar silhouette was now a jagged question mark, and the city's pulsing crossroads became known as Ground Zero, a name that stuck like ash. For the first time in living memory, Manhattan wasn't building up. It was pausing to mourn. The ceaseless, caffeinated drive of the city hit an invisible wall. Steelworkers, firefighters, police, and volunteers swarmed the site, not to weld or rivet, but to sift, to recover, to honor. Silence, unusual and haunting, replaced the clang of construction. In the city that never sleeps, a collective breath was held, one long, shuddering pause. But even in the thick of sorrow, New York did what New York always does. It looked up. The conversation started almost immediately, sometimes heated, sometimes hushed, about what should rise in the empty space. Should anything stand there at all? Could you possibly rebuild without erasing the pain? For years, that gaping wound in the ground remained, a physical and psychic scar, ringed by fences, crowds, and the weight of memory. It became sacred by default, hallowed not by choice, but by necessity. Yet slowly, as only New York can, plans began to take shape. Sketches on napkins became blueprints. Blueprints became arguments. Arguments became votes. Cranes returned, steel returned, and the city's energy, stubborn as ever, began to surge back. But this time, the goal wasn't to overwrite what came before. It was to build something new, right beside the memory of what was lost. Before a single beam was hoisted, one thing was clear. The skyline was no longer just a billboard for ambition. It had become a memorial, a jagged silhouette shaped by both triumph and tragedy. And the story was far from over. After devastation, the city famous for its velocity and bravado did the unthinkable. It paused, not to surrender, but to rethink. Rebuilding downtown wasn't just about blueprints or budgets. It was about deciding who New York was now. Could any tower ever fill those shoes? Should it even try? Answers trickled in, frustrating and slow. In 2003, architect Daniel Libeskin's design was selected for the new World Trade Center site. This wasn't just about resurrecting height. It was about stitching wounds, balancing memory and renewal. The plan called for more than just offices, public memorials, green parks, subways, sunlight. It wasn't a nostalgia trip. It was a gamble on what could be, not what had been. At the heart of it all, one World Trade Center, the so-called Freedom Tower. From the northwest corner of Ground Zero, it grew, floor by shimmering floor, until it pierced the clouds at 1,076 feet, a number chosen to echo the year America was born. But this wasn't just flag-waving. This was defiance, rendered in glass and steel, a new reaching upwards despite the weight of loss. Construction kicked off in 2006, and by 2014, One World Trade Center opened its doors, a faceted crystalline obelisk, never pretending to be the twins it replaced. It offered something different, reflection, in every sense. Depending on the light, It glows, darkens, or nearly disappears, a presence without swagger. Right beside it, the 9/11 Memorial opened in 2011. Two enormous voids mark the footprints of the original towers, each rimmed by waterfalls that tumble endlessly into darkness. The names of the lost are etched into bronze, a roll call of lives that echo through the city's bones. This isn't just another part of the skyline. It's the city's soul, open to the sky. The new skyline took its sweet time to emerge. Other towers joined the chorus. 3 World Trade Center, 4 World Trade Center, even a new 7 World Trade Center. Each one sleek, modern, and unapologetically itself. Together, they didn't just replace what was lost. They changed the very DNA of Lower Manhattan. New York didn't rebuild to erase the tragedy. It rebuilt to acknowledge it, and then to move forward. In the process, the city reminded the world of a painfully simple truth. You can knock New York down, but you can't keep it from rising. These days, the Manhattan skyline is more than a cluster of buildings. It's a living symbol. Ambition, resilience, the ever-elusive American dream, all drawn in steel and glass. No other silhouette on Earth carries quite so much baggage. You could sketch it with 5 lines on a napkin, and the world would still recognize it. It's a skyline that tells stories. Stories of engineers who laughed at gravity, of ironworkers who balanced on beams in the wind, of architects with dreams taller than their egos, and of immigrants who crossed oceans to help build them all. It's about risk, reward, and the endless act of reinvention. The skyline is the city's pulse, never settling, always in flux. And just when you think you've memorized every contour, New York throws you a curveball. In recent years, the vertical race has shifted uptown. Along Billionaires Row, towers like 432 Park Avenue, Central Park Tower, and 111 West 57th Street have popped up like toothpicks on the horizon, super skinny, wind-battered, and built for a tiny slice of the ultra-wealthy. Some call them engineering marvels. Others call them sky-high billboards for inequality. Either way, they are proof. The city's ambitions haven't gotten any shorter. Meanwhile, over in Hudson Yards, a whole new neighborhood has sprouted atop what used to be rail yards. Glass towers, public art, and gleaming headquarters now occupy ground that once echoed with the sound of freight trains. The skyline, always restless, is now stretching farther west, adapting to the city's shifting dreams and priorities. Yet for all its restless growth, the skyline never truly forgets. The Empire State Building still burns against the night. The Chrysler Spire still flashes in the first rays of sunrise. And One World Trade Center stands, both solemn and dazzling, reminding you of what was lost and what was rebuilt. Above all else, the skyline is New York's true monument. Not a statue, not a plaque. It's the ever-evolving outline that defines the city, not just in shape, but in spirit. It's where humanity dared to climb, again and again, through booms, busts, wars, and heartbreak. The skyline is millions of lives, hopes, and hustles, reflected in glass. It doesn't just mark where the city ends. It marks where imagination begins. Because in Manhattan, the sky has never been a ceiling. It's always just another floor, waiting for someone brave or reckless enough to build.